I'm Aaron Graper with Ventrac, and in this video, we're talking about aeration. So it's springtime, we're in April in the Northeast, and that means this is the perfect time to start thinking about getting turf ready for the season. The whole point of aeration on your turf is to help make the turf more healthy by getting oxygen to the root zones of the grass. And the way that you do that is getting underneath the surface with tools like this. These two tools do it in two different ways, and that means they're suitable for different applications. To my left, we have a tractor on duals with the regular aerator, and to my right, we have a tractor on duals with the AERA-Vator. The Aerator is more of a classic aeration device. It's like what you would see on a walk-behind piece of equipment or a similar tractor-style setup. And with core tines on it, what you're doing is you're poking in underneath the turf, pulling a plug out, and then leaving a hole. That's a good thing for some reasons, but it also presents challenges. On some properties, you're going to want to clean that material up, and that's going to take extra time. On other properties, it's fine to let it go, and when that's the case, there's really no difference in the effort that it takes between one attachment to the other. The AERA-Vator is very different because you're not actually removing any material in the process. The tines on the AERA-Vator poke underneath the ground, and then they use vibration to shake the ground apart to open that hole up but not leave material on the surface. When you're using these in a professional setting as a commercial contractor, it is a lot easier to sell core aeration because when you're done with it, you see all of the progress. All of the progress on the AERA-Vator is subsurface, so it's still there, but it's a little bit harder to identify from just watching at a distance. Because it's early springtime, the ground right now is very soft. If I move my feet where I've been standing for a little bit, I actually see moisture underneath them. But this is the type of season that you want to use the Aerator especially. You really have to have the right level of moisture to be able to punch through the surface, grab those cores, and lift them out. If you're using something like this slicer tine, it's a little bit less critical what the temperature is like, what the dryness is like, and so you can use these more often through the season, and you also don't do quite as much turf damage. But if you want one attachment to rule them all for aeration and you don't want to think about when you can and can't work, the AERA-Vator is a better tool. The only seasonal problem you can occasionally run into with the AERA-Vator is when it's so wet that it starts to pack mud up on the rear roller, but it's an easy problem to solve. You just wash it off or scrape it off while you're working and you can keep going again. In addition to accomplishing aeration, the AERA-Vator also has the ability to spread seed at the same time. What you notice now is an optional seed box on the top of this AERA-Vator, and it runs off the 12-volt power supply on the tractor. What that means is you can go out and do it. We do have a primary seeder that I always recommend for pure installation projects when you're starting with bare ground or it's very sparsely covered, but I have seen the AERA-Vator successfully used to establish turf stands where it's maybe a patchy spot that is very dead, that you're really reworking, or if you've gone through it with a soil cultivator and you're just working in a small zone, sometimes the AERA-Vator is just as good of a tool to accomplish that. All right, let's take a closer look at each one of these attachments and I'll show you some of the details of how they work. First of all, we've got this whole row of mostly core tines. This Aerator actually has a combination of core tines and spoon tines on it now. When you order this attachment, you can select it to be delivered with slicer tines or the open spoon tines instead. Like I said, this has a combination on it, but it's mostly core tines. If you use this open spoon tine, it's just not closed off. So you're not actually creating a plug. It's creating more of a void, and then as it passes through, it doesn't pull as much out, if anything, and when it does, it's not in a confined plug-like shape. The slicer tines are not going to pull anything. They're just going to make slits into the ground, and you could even combo these if you wanted to. Don't really see that a whole lot, but it is possible to kind of mix and match and pick your poison here. Operationally, the most important thing with the Aerator is the weights that are on it. As you see, I've got 8 weights on, and that's the maximum amount. Sometimes you don't need this much. When the ground is as soft as it is right now, I could probably get away with maybe half of this weight. I could probably even do it with none. But the harder it gets, the later into spring it gets, the more weight you're going to want to add to this to make it more effective. Other than that, this is a remarkably simple attachment. The Aerator doesn't have a lot going on. There's not a lot to think about. You basically just put it in float and drive. One of the things you want to be very careful of though is turning with the Aerator. It's best to run straight lines, and then when you're done with a pass, pick it up out of the ground, make a Y turn, put it back in going the other direction. If you try to go through it too sharp of a turn, these are not structural joints to the point where you can really stress them sideways, and these tines are hardened, so that they last over time. And if you put a lot of torsional force into them, you can crack them out. So it's just something to think about. You'll get a lot more longevity out of them if you don't stress them sideways. Now, going over to the AERA-Vator, this is a little bit more complex to run, but from the operator's seat, still simple. The attachment itself operates on a totally different principle. So these tines here are actually mounted on a shaft that is PTO powered. And what it does is it goes in the ground and it vibrates back and forth, left and right, fore and aft, and it fractures the ground underneath of it. This happens at the speed of how fast you drive forward. So conversely to the Aerator, whether I go 1 mile an hour or 5 miles an hour, it's gonna be pretty much the same result. Here, you're looking at the intensity of that hole and the frequency of those holes changing based on your ground speed. So the faster you go, the less impact this is gonna make and the more shallow impact it's gonna make. And the slower you go, the more sideways impact and deeper it's gonna go. The reason this works when it's dry out as well as wet is because you have a lot of extra power and action going into getting it underneath the surface. And when it's dry, it's even more critical to do that because you want to spread apart that hard ground so that it can take water on. When you get into the middle of summer, oftentimes what will happen is the ground will be so hard, even if you do get a rain, that water just washes off and it doesn't actually make it to the turf. By using the AERA-Vator, you're able to get that moisture underneath the turf into the root zone where it really matters. Like I mentioned before, this AERA-Vator has the seed box on it, and so it allows you to overseed at the same time. It is possible to run without the seed box and weights in place on this 2-inch bar instead of the seed box. When you're running the AERA-Vator, it is okay to turn. It is a little bit similar to the Aerator, but it's not quite as critical. These tines are solid steel, there's no gaps in them, and they're not hardened tines, so you're not gonna do as much damage if you turn hard. But best practice is still to get to the end of a run, lift it out of the ground, and then make your turn and get back into the ground. One key point to mention is that in order to use the AERA-Vator, you have to remove the pin from the clutch lever so that the clutch can actually engage and turn the mechanism on. That's located right here. You'll pull this pin, and then once you let it float, it's active, and you can just store this pin in this upper hole right here, not doing anything. It is important to put this pin back when you're done because it moves a stop pin on the hitch arms that allow you to get out of the attachment and connect to the attachment. So make sure this is pinned back when you attach to the AERA-Vator. One last operational point on the AERA-Vator is that it does have a roller on the back where the Aerator doesn't have anything like that. The Aerator is simple. You put the jack stands up and run. The AERA-Vator has a jack stand as well, but as soon as that is up, you're not quite ready to run. You want to make sure that you pay attention to where your roller is set. That roller has adjustments, and those are located on the left and right side back here on the back. So if the roller's all the way up, it gives the tines full license to go as deep as possible. If the roller is all the way down, then you're barely going into the surface. Before you operate, it's good to think about where you have that set from previous times using it and whether that's the right place for now. Between these two, Ventrac has got aeration covered. And the AERA-Vator especially, it's a tool that I really love. I never love to pick my favorite attachment over another attachment because they're all so good. But in this moment, if you're going head to head, Aerator versus AERA-Vator, I probably have to pick the AERA-Vator because versatility is key to us, and this one has more versatility to it. It's just a cool attachment to watch run. It's hyper effective, but when you really need to make impact, you need to pull stuff out of the ground. The Aerator is there to assist. Of course, I wouldn't be doing my job if I stopped at aeration, so I'm going to take this time to remind you that once you're done with either one of these tools, the tractor does connect to other attachments in less than a minute, and you can be on your way mowing or stump grinding or blowing leaves or some other thing. So the tractor is all purpose. Aeration is just another one of the things we do, but we do it very, very well. Thank you for watching the highlight on these two attachments. If you have any specific questions about when either one of these is applicable, which one is best for you, feel free to leave a comment on the video, call us at the factory, talk to your local dealer, and be sure to check out all of the other Ventrac equipment as well, in person and on all of our social media channels. We do videos every week, and we're happy to show it to you. Thanks for watching.